So this is the warm-up that I do for all of my leg days. I use a protocol called the RAMP protocol, which is an acronym for Raise, Activate, Mobilize, Potentiate. So it's a 4-phase protocol, which you can read about in my book. The objective of phase 1 is to raise your heart rate, your sweat rate, your core temperature, your breathing rate. The most efficient way to do this is by using a cardio machine. I always start off on the rowing machine. The reason I choose the rower is because of the changing joint angles through this movement. As you can see, the hip, knee and ankle go through quite a large range of motion, which is going to be very beneficial when you start your squatting or deadlifting or any of the leg movements that you're going to be doing throughout your workout. It's also just a great way to pave those neural pathways from your brain to your muscles to prime your body for what you're going to be doing next. Rowing is actually quite a technical movement pattern. I've got a video tutorial explaining exactly how to row, which you can check out. But if you don't want to row, you can always jump on a bike or run on a treadmill or an elliptical or the assault bike. Just pick a cardio movement that you like that will raise your heart rate, temperature, breathing rate, and sweat rate. The next phase is to activate the muscles that you're going to be using in your workout. So after getting off the rowing machine, I often do some banded crab walks, and sometimes I'll even use machines like the leg extension or hamstring curl machine, or even the hip extension machine, just to target those muscles that I'm going to be using in my workout, and I keep it at very, very light loads and I go for higher repetitions. Another activation exercise that I really like to do are these cat-cow flow-throughs. It's a great exercise to wake up and activate the pelvis and the scapulars, and of course the spine as it moves through a large range of motion. So here I'm focusing on a posterior pelvic tilt as I push the ground away into my cat position and round my back and protract my scapulars. Then as I go down into my cow position, I'm thinking of an anterior pelvic tilt and retracting my scapulars, dropping my chest down and getting a really good stretch. So once I've woken up and activated the muscles that I'm going to be using in my workout, I do a very brief foam rolling routine. So here I like to roll out my ITB and my quads. If I find a knot or a trigger point, I'll pause there and sort of roll side to side, as you can see here, to try and undo that knot before moving on to the rest of the leg. I'll then move on to my calves. I like to hover above the ground when I do this to create a little bit of extra downward pressure to really get into the muscle belly. I'll put one leg on top of the other if I need extra load, or sometimes I'll even stop in a position and roll side to side like I did for my quads and ITB to really get rid of any knots that I can feel in my calves. I'll then move on to my hamstrings. So I'll start up by rolling out the origin, which is at the higher part of the leg, and then I'll work my way down the muscle belly towards the insertion, which is around the knee. And finally, I'll roll out my back, starting at the lower back, focusing on the QLs, just to loosen up that section, and then I'll move up my rectus spinae all the way to the top of my spine. Next, I move into the mobility phase of the warm-up. So I like to start with some up dog and down dog transitions. Before I start flowing between the two positions, I like to get into my down dog position and start pedaling my feet to warm up the calves and hamstrings. Then I move into the flow. On my down dog, I'm focusing on driving my heels towards the ground and getting a really good stretch through my hamstrings. I'm also working on my shoulder flexion and extension, trying to get my head through the window created between my arms and the ground. And then as I go into my up dog, I'm thinking about stretching out my abs, keeping my quads nice and strong as I bend my back and get a really good stretch. Next, I move into this lizard stretch with a rotation, a great exercise to open up the hips and increase mobility through the spine and back. I'll do about 10 of these each side. Here I'm focusing on maintaining a nice strong plank position at the start, and then I'm trying to step my foot to the exact position that my hand was in. And then as I bring my leg back to the position that I began in, I try not to drag it across the floor and keep some height through my body. After doing about 10 each side, I'll drop my back leg to the ground and fall into a hip flexor stretch. I'll play around in this position. I'll drive my knee out to the side, try to open up my hips, as well as stretch my calves and my hip flexor. Then I'll go down into the bottom of a deep squat or an ass to grass squat, and I'll try to open up my hips and ankles by shifting my weight side to side. I like to use a pole here just for an extra bit of balance and stability as I'm still warming up. So I'll do about 5 to 10 reps with the pole for assistance, and then I'll do about 5 reps without the pole. Then I'll move on to the Cossack stretch, which is a really good exercise to not only stretch the adductor and hamstring of the straight leg, but you get a good quad and glute stretch of the bent leg and some good muscle activation as you press out at the bottom. I love this exercise to warm up for squats. It really opens up the hips and gives me some great range of motion. Now the final phase of the warm-up is the potentiation phase, or you could call it the priming phase. This is where you begin your warm-up sets with the exact same technique that you're going to be using for your first working set. For example, on a day that I'm starting off with squats, I'll use the empty bar and I'll try to mimic the exact technique that I'll be using when the weight gets heavier. I'll do about 20 reps with the empty bar, then I'll do 4 to 5 warm-up sets where I slowly increase the load set to set and decrease the repetitions set to set. For example, I might take 60% of the weight that I'm going to be doing for my first working set and I'll do 5 reps. I'll then do 70% of the weight for my first working set for 4 reps, so on and so forth. Now remember, your entire warm-up doesn't need to be any more than about 10 to 15 minutes. Try to be as efficient as possible. You don't need a rest between phases of the warm-up. Just move from phase to phase until you're ready to start your working sets.